Kathleen Derringer, and I'm a member of the Kingsley board, and I am nominally our historian. Didn't even know that position existed. So as historian, I'm lucky to be able to spend a little bit of time in the city archives, trolling through our Kingsley materials, usually doing research for either an artist or somebody on the board. And a couple of weeks ago, I had the pleasure of spending an entire day in the archives with our guest speaker today, Bruce Marwick. Now, this was, for me, a real treat because Bruce is extremely enthusiastic and passionate about art and art history, especially here in Sacramento. So the two of us spent the day trolling through 16 boxes of Kingsley materials, looking for a little tidbit that maybe he could use in his presentation today. Now, I think he comes by this curiosity and enthusiasm honestly. He has dual degrees from Occidental College down in Southern California in both art history and studio art. And he's worked in the industry as a graphic artist and designer for many, many years. And along the way, he seems to have acquired a deep interest in architecture and in local art history. So we are very lucky today to have him with us, and he's going to enlighten us with a few anecdotes and some beautiful slides about the art history in our own community of Sacramento. Now, I should also mention that Bruce is on the board of the Sacramento History Alliance here in town, and he is president and preservation chair of the Sacramento Art Deco Society. And I know a few of his friends from the Art Deco Society are here in support of him. So we're going to see some really lovely slides of our own town with Bruce's commentary. And I think you're all going to enjoy this a lot. And I'd like you to join me in welcoming Bruce Marwick.
Good afternoon, and thank you, Kathleen, for that wonderful introduction. And I'm just thrilled to be here. When I was invited to participate in the speaker series, I'm very familiar with it, and I thought, wow, that's an interesting change because I appreciate all the wonderful artists you have brought in for them to reflect on their work. And I said, well, have you had a historian before? And well, it was kind of a consideration of kind of mixing it up. And I was thrilled because I do really love and appreciate art. My background is in it. And I have this kind of unique interest of really engaging with Sacramento artistic history and Northern California, by and large, between 1900 and World War II. And so with that in mind, there was almost over a year from when I was first invited to actually putting this on today. And the thought process is, well, should I do one of the, dare I say, in the can presentations that I've done on subjects like the New Deal, specific artists like Ralph Stackpole. I have a great interest in the City College art balls, which I'm going to share today. And then I had this epiphany, and the epiphany was, I think I can bring them all together with the Kingsley Art Club. And the thread would be, how did the Kingsley engage with these other institutions and vice versa? And I was pleasantly surprised to see how much engagement there truly was. So without further ado, I will start the process. So each of these images have meaning to Sacramento, and I'll give you an opportunity to a little bit more detail as I get into the presentation, but I will be talking about murals, bas-reliefs that are associated with terracotta and specifically Glad McBean, paintings. That painting is actually here at the Crocker, and then other art forms. This was a dance performance at something called the Sacramento Art Center that was here because of the New Deal in the 1930s. And I'm holding, there we go. I will get the touch eventually. I always like to start these programs because one of the great discoveries of was that 15 years ago when I really started to get deep and seeking out archives. I would find an individual, potentially an artist, and then I would dive in the archives, and I discovered Sacramento has a terrific set of institutions, all of which I've embraced, and many have examples here, and they include the California State Library, the California State Archives, on the city side, the Center for Sacramento History, which are the city archives, the Sacramento Room at the Public Library, which is their special collections. Additionally, I discovered that City College has a terrific special collections. And finally, already I do touch on Art Deco as part of the New Deal, is there's a terrific institution out of UC Berkeley. It's actually an online Wikipedia resource for anything that is involved with the New Deal. And the one that's highlighted is for a reason, and that is, Kathleen Derringer gave me a great introduction. We spent a full day together at the Center for Sacramento History, and I have a particularly soft spot because for many years I was on the board of that institution. And then I certainly want to thank the Kingsley again for the invitation to be here today. So this is in 4 parts. The first part is going to be 2 wonderful institutions that were created beginning in 1926 at the new City College, at the time Sacramento Junior College campus on Freeport. And the 2 institutions were the Student Arts League and, as part of a fundraising effort, the Art Balls. Just a show of hands, is anyone familiar with the Sacramento Junior College Art Balls and what they were as an institution? They existed for roughly 20 years between 1926 and roughly 1947. And this gentleman that I'm showing up here, John Matthew, he was the impetus of the Art Students League and the Art Balls. He was recently, had gotten a master's at Chicago Art Institute. He was a Northern Californian from Berkeley, and he was hired at the new campus on Freeport. And Lillard, the president, said, "We want you to put this school on the map. It's a junior college, but I have grander ambitions for this school." And one of the ambitions was to put really important departments that weren't available to young people, not just in Northern California, but the country. And they included not just a very robust art program that included commercial art, but they had aeronautics, they had nursing, they had programs that were not typically available at the public community college level. Another thing I'm going to talk about today is just wonderful discoveries, and I love finding original information specific to actual historic people I'm researching. In the special collections at City College, I actually discovered that Matthew had given his personal yearbooks from SJC, Sacramento Junior College, to the special collections. So this is actually his signature in one of the, and I was just delighted to discover that. That is, of course, a portrait of John Matthew on the left, and on the right, his engagement with students, and I think that specifically was associated with the Art Students League. He lived very close to City College. As a matter of fact, he lived on 12th in Land Park, and this is his studio. And you can get a feel for some of his work because he was an artist himself. And this crossover between how did the Kingsley engage with City College or John Matthew? John Matthew had been both a juror, different annual art shows, or actual participant in the annual show. A blast of color. So as I started finding out about the City College Art Balls, this one in the center, the blue one, was the first one I saw. I saw it in special collections at Sacramento Public Library, and I just loved it. I just thought, well, this is wonderful. It's all hand-drawn. The lettering is hand-drawn. This is all, of course, before computer. And I just thought it's a lovely, lovely piece. I want to see more, because at that time, I figured out there was 20 plus art balls that had happened. I wanted to see all the covers. And I wasn't finding them, and then there's something called the Sacramento Archives Crawl. And at the archives crawl, which is different archives around town, there was a table from the special collections librarian at City College. And I said, do you have any of these covers? She says, I have all of them. You know, I was just kind of bowled over. I said, well, I'm coming over as soon as possible. And these are just a selection. I think I counted, there's like 14 of the 20. And then once again, they're all hand-drawn. Some are more deco than others. But, you know, as just a splash of color, it's just wonderful to see. I'm going to highlight 2 or 3, just some of the covers. And then they also have a wealth of both original photos, glossy 8x10s, and just sundry other materials promoting the art balls. Of course, this one from 1928, this is right at the time when Hollywood was promoting movies by like Ramon Navarro or Rudolph Valentino. And so it's very much of the period, but just the style of typography and how it's drawn, even the zigzag on the jacket is just very emblematic of the Deco era. The effort these kids put into these stage productions, because it was predominantly, in the case of, in the theater department, you have a theater, dare I say, generally a cache of potential items that you can use. The Art Students League was putting this, probably reaching out and drawing from that, but they were reaching out to furniture retailers, anyone who would help participate, because the art balls eventually became a citywide activity. The city looked forward to them every year. This is only 3 years in, and you can you see the level of adornment and also just the costuming. And then this is a close-up. And this is our local in 1928, the Rudolph Valentino. But I also love another details of period. Does anyone know the name Louise Brooks? Silent film star, and she was noted for her short haircut. And these, you talk about, this is all pre-social media, but this generation of young people knew and appreciated it, and so the young women have, these two in particular, at the feet of the Sultan, have their Louise Brooks haircuts. Another one of my favorites is Trip to Mars. And I love Trip to Mars because they had some outfits that were so over the top. This was also the time when the famous German movie Metropolis had come out with the female robot that eventually became kind of the impetus for C-3PO, if you can visualize those two. But this one has an interesting, I think, almost like regional, is that she also looks like she has some Mayan thrown in. And, we talk about cosplay today, if you've heard that term for young people, a costume play. Well, this was costume play of the 1920s. And once again, some of the costuming is less dramatic or refined, but even you can see the typeface and the use of graphics, it very much speaks to the Art Deco period. And then I'm going to show you a photo of the lavishness of the events, because the balls were a stage show and a performance that generally had a theme, but then they would have a banquet, and then they would have a big formal dance that would generally last to 2 a.m. So this was, an activity between 9 p.m. and 2 a.m. It started at the college, and it outgrew that in 1931, 32, about 6 years in, they moved it down to Memorial Auditorium. So if you haven't read it, it's the 2 gymnasiums will be transformed by stars, comets, and the great constellations of the Milky Way, mingled with conventional ideas of Martian cities in geometric designs. This is prose in the 1929 Pony Express. This is Sacramento. So one of the things I love about this, in the background, you can see some of the detailing, like they built these geometric palm trees. I think this is supposed to be a spaceship, although it looks more like a mushroom. But you got to remember, this is even before Buck Rogers. This is like 3 or 4 years before Buck Rogers was established. Back here, I think right here is the woman I just showed you, I identified. But you can see it was a formal. Everyone got dressed up. It was black tie. The thing that intrigued me most about this photo was the ceiling. And when I first saw it, I said, that is fantastic. What are they? And what I realized was, it was a pretty quick answer. I said, well, this is an aeronautics school. What do they have access to? Parachutes. And I thought, who had the idea? Terrific idea. And secondly, just getting up there on the ceiling and getting them evenly spaced out, I mean, that took effort. Just a terrific idea. 1929. Another one I love is 1935, Le Bal Chinois. Once again, the graphics are quite nice. The reason I selected this one is it had some photos that showed scaling of what they would try to do. This, of course, is all before CGI and movie making, where everything had to be what they call practical. It had to be built. And then the question is, where do you get the materials? Where do you get the paper mache? This is the floor of Memorial Auditorium. And one of the unique things about Memorial Auditorium as a multi-purpose city civic center is that the slanted floor that can be set up with removable chairs, like an auditorium, a seated auditorium, the flooring, you may or may not know, can be tilted up so it's flat with the stage. And that was a beautiful thing for the balls, because they could do two things. They could have the floor show not just on the stage, but all over the floor of the arena. And then afterwards, they could have a big lavish dance. So, I mean, at the top, they were getting 5,000 people for the ball, with 1,000 people on the dance floor. They would have an orchestra for the performance art piece of the ball. And then afterwards, they generally have a full band for the dancing part. I'm going to once again point out two things. So this, from the stage floor to the top of the drapes is 50 feet at Memorial. So if you're going to have something, you have to have some big pieces. So this Buddha is over 20 to 24 feet tall, and this is probably 30 feet high. And this was just any scraps they could get during the 30s to make this happen. I'll give you a little bit for scaling. This just gives you an idea of having this. Last couple of years, I've been going with my daughter to the Chinese New Year's parade, so very familiar with Chinese dragons. But I'd like you to focus on this young woman, because she's in the next photo. So there she's sitting on the shoulder of Buddha, so you get an idea of Buddha. Buddha is, like I'm saying, 20 plus feet tall, all out of wood and paper mache and other. I mean, I don't know the materials. Both last two photos are a little on the fuzzy side because they're coming out of the yearbooks, because unfortunately they don't have nice glossies of everything. But just for size reference, I thought this is very telling. Another thing interesting about this is, you see the background? Originally behind the Aeronautics Building, if you're familiar, which is 12th Street, adjacent or where the big water tower is, that street, they had what they called the art barns. And the art barns, it's not clear whether they were there originally or they were moved there, but that is where they put together these huge, almost like it reminds me of the Rose Parade. I spent many years in Southern California where you put on the lavish floats. They would build this stuff. They had some big doors. Then the question is, how do you get it downtown? And that became a spectacle. They would bring out flatbed trucks, get the big displays. They had a motorcycle police escort, I've seen the pictures, and they drive proudly down Freeport towards Memorial to put these things up. Another residual, because they got the whole campus involved, was that all the departments, whether it was fashion or theater costuming, if they built, like one year was dinosaurs, they built a giant dinosaur. They elicited football players to come out and push the thing. So it wasn't, so the idea was to get as many people as involved. This is obviously fashion design. And it's kind of wonderful. But then the question is, what did they design? And this was another feat. This is a little later. United Nations, actually in the early 40s. They don't have a tremendous, they have wonderful things, but sometimes it's a little spotty. Luckily, somebody had the sense of saving these illustrations because they're just fantastic. I actually, one year, I thought this was so kind of interesting, I actually used it on a family Christmas card. And then just to show that there was also all the backstage energy. So this is 4 shots I took from, there's actually a composite film of the art balls. I was very happy to see it. It's a little, in some cases, spotty in terms of quality and focus, but some of the things it showed were some of the other activities that, of course, happen with theater and theatrics backstage. But I was delighted to see that they showed this as well as, dare I say, young technical students doing the back theater work. And then here's another wonderful story. So we have the Students' Art League. They've created the Art Ball as a fundraiser, their annual fundraiser. They turned out to be quite successful. This is 9-10 years in. They're at Memorial, so they have the responsibility for that rental. They also have the responsibility for getting all the donations, as I've shown theatrically what they need. They also need to manage and do advertising. There's photos of young students painting signboards to put up around town. At the end, the real question is, could you clear a profit? In this particular of Le Bal Chinois, they cleared a profit. And by today's standards, $1,200 or $1,279 doesn't seem significant, but when you see the inflation, that's pretty good. To go through that and clear anything. In many cases when you're a student, just breaking even, you count it as a win. The lovely part was that they would take that and roll it back into grants for the students. And that's just a terrific thing because you have the duality of students learning a tremendous amount through the activity of producing this event, and then be able to support them at the other end is, I just think, terrific. Another thing I like to delve into and tell the story of art is the creative souls. And throughout this presentation, I talk about wonderful things that have happened in my own kind of research and discovery that were personal. And this one gets as personal as ever. So about 15 years ago, when I first went to special collections, I discovered that a teacher I had, who was late in her career, Bernice Polifka, had been at City College. And it came to me as I had been over doing research first time at City College, roughly 2011, and I'd seen some graphics by a woman by the name of Bernice Polifka. It didn't hit me, and I'm driving home, and I live in Land Park, so it wasn't a big drive. And I thought, oh my gosh, I wonder if that's Polifka, my teacher at the Art Center College of Design in LA. And I looked it up, and absolutely it was her. And I was thrilled because I didn't know she was from Sacramento. I didn't know she attended City College. And it was just a very serendipitous, because Bernice was a kind of considered a master at the Art Center. She was one of the fundamental classes that everyone who went through Art Center took, and hers was color theory. On the right are the two covers she did. She was very involved in the art ball. At one point, she was president of the Art Students League. She was on multiple committees, including choosing the queen. And it was 1931 and 1932. And then another thing that's wonderful is all the pictures of the student groups from City College. And I'm using the term City College because it's just more in my frame of reference. We're really talking about Sacramento Junior College, but I, at this point, referred to it as City College. There's Bernice Plifka, right in the middle, 1932. And there's John Matthew. And he's very tall, so it kind of helped him. So that's section one. Section two is the sculptors of Gladwin McBean. And I wanted to include this because, and I just realized when I shifted over, the show has been being run, that the system has changed my lettering, but that's fine. But those were supposed to be capitalization, so. How many of you know about the history and kind of the famous part of Gladwin McBean? So for those who aren't familiar, Gladwin McBean was the leading architectural terracotta company in the western United States, located in Lincoln because of its history of wonderful clay between roughly 1880 and World War II. They exist to this day, and they exist because they are also had the best large format sewer clay pipe to this day. And they are very much a successful business. They're now owned by Pacific Building Products. But one of the things they did for the community, they also brought classically trained artists to America. Because at the time their buildings were for architectural terracotta, all manners of classic styles, Beaux-Arts architecture, Art Deco architecture, Victorian architecture, they all leaned into those different genres, and what fell out of it was the need for gargoyles and maidens and eagles, and they really excelled at it. And so I'm just going to talk just briefly about a few of the artists. So that's Carlo Taliabu. He came over in 1924 from Milan. He had been, as a child, an orphan, showed art talent. The nuns supported him. He went through academy in Milan. Unfortunately, he then got caught up in World War I for many years. And then, as some of you may know, most of Europe, including Italy, was in dire straits after World War I financially. And he was so happy when in 1924, Peter McBean hired him to come to little Lincoln, California from Milan, if you can imagine. But he was thrilled because he was going to be able to do his craft, and he was going to be in, this wonderful cohort of Italian artists. Additionally, I'll just point out that's Ernst Kadel. He had just become the head modeler. And Ernesto Molinaro. And he's important because the California State Library has a terrific 9,000-piece collection of glass plates of all of their work. And the glass plates or prints were to basically explain or proof to the architects what they were doing, and thumbs up, thumbs down. And he was responsible for most of the photography. The shields. So this is an example of the heroic shields they would do. And these are for the Spreckels building, Sugar building in San Diego, and they're still on the building to this day. This was also an important activity. There's such a camaraderie, and they treated it as like a community affair, putting these things together. They would put them up. They get set up and do the whole group on the terracotta. Just a few architectural examples. This is the Forum building on 9th Street near K Street. It was built as a Beaux-Arts building, but eventually, as we'll do in retail, it kept getting modernized, and one of the modernizations in the 30s was to decoize the first couple of floors. And so that was the level of terracotta just for the first couple of floors. This building also has some wonderful metalwork. This is all period. A detail showing classic geometric shapes and chevrons. And then this is how the building looked in the 30s. It had originally, Sacramento is more a regional town, didn't have the wherewithal to put up a big building in one fell swoop. So this building was originally built, I think 5 floors in these are rough numbers, 1910. And then a few years later, they added another 5 stories. The top was very much kind of eclectic Beaux-Arts. And then when this was done, these were the lower floors. You can see that was the entrance I just showed you. And the building was wonderfully restored in the 80s and 90s. Sadly, because of safety, all the terracotta at the top was pulled off. So it basically looks like the middle section right to the top. But the lower floors are still in quite nice shape, as I just shared with you. And then another real treasure, and tells the magnitude. So the previous building I showed you, had several dozen tons of terracotta. Does anyone recognize this building? This is actually the backside looking from SF MoMA at the Pacific Telephone Building. When it was built in 1924, it was the tallest building in San Francisco. The interesting part, from a few dozen tons, this exemplified Gladden McBean's capacity for large format terracotta. This building has 3,200 tons of terracotta. And it is an Art Deco masterpiece, and it was also done by one of the notable and the Art Deco architect of the Bay Area, Timothy Pfluger. This is the top. Because one of the things about a skyscraper with terracotta, some of the best terracotta is way up in the sky. And unless you have a zoom of like 600, it's hard to get up there close and personal. And this is a shot that I had to be reminded about. A person here in the audience reminded me about this photo, even though I'd seen it many times in a wonderful book on Gladden McBean. I had to, it's kind of like the joke of paintings on the wall. You have to go back and re-engage. And I did, and I said, that is still a terrific photo, particularly since, and I had always missed this in the book, here are 2 people for scale. And the thought process is maybe, although it may be, just a little projection, one of them may be Timothy Pfluger. But wouldn't that be wonderful? You can see these eagles in comparison, just how big they are. And this small piece is another, I taught, like an epiphany, like Bernice Plifka. This also was an epiphany. And the epiphany was, I wanted to get more in depth into the actual artists at Gladden McBean. They were such a team effort that the factory really didn't want to promote the fact that they had individual artists, because I think they didn't want to be cherry-picked. They were selling a studio, they were not selling an artist. And this piece was one of the few pieces that I knew who the artist was. It was Carlo Talibu, that person I pointed out that was from Milan through World War I. And I thought, well, it's a lovely little piece because it's also not monumental. It's a garden piece. It's about this big. They still have the molds, and you can still get one from Gladden McBean in your own choice of color. So I'm just going to go through to give you kind of the variety of what one artist of this era could and did do in Sacramento or Northern California. These are 3 bas reliefs. They're approximately 5 by 5s that are on the Bohemian Club in downtown San Francisco. They were done, he did them jointly with another famous California sculptor, also a Bohemian Club president and member, Heg Pagian. Some say Patigan. But Pagian is the person who did if you've ever seen the Bohemian Grove, they have a stage and they have a giant carved owl. That's Heg Pagian. He did that. And as the story goes, the 2 were kind of at conflict with each other because, you know, they were both very strong-willed artisans. But they did a beautiful job. There's actually a 4th one. And it was very common as you get into this subject matter of series of bas reliefs. Another series from 1936, these are 2 WPA buildings. They're still on N Street. Originally, on left to right, left was the California Department of Transportation. It included DMV and Highway Patrol. And on the right was Public Works. They still have the surrounds, which look like that, but the departments have changed. You know, the Department of DMV is now Food and Ag, and then the Public Works is now Public Transportation. It's a little bit better fit when you see the subject matter. So each had 6 custom, and they're just really reflective of the Deco era. You know, here he was a classic designer, but he was embracing the period because actually what he was actually known for was his classical styled Greek statues, including 2 large ones he did for the World's Fair in 1939 in San Francisco. And there's 2 different water resource, and I've always thought they are, I mean, I'd love to have just a replication of that. I've always loved the scene. Anyone recognize this? For years and years and years, I knew about this piece. The 3 water towers, the one in East Sac, the one adjacent to City College, and then the one off Stockton Boulevard near UCD Medical, had these bas reliefs. They're not in terracotta, they're actually in cast concrete. To save money, a lot of what was left of bas reliefs that were done before World War II were starting to be done in concrete. It was cheaper, but it didn't have the kind of refinement. The terracotta was very smooth. There's always kind of a rough edge, but I thought it was quite attractive. When I see kind of public art and there's nothing to kind of designate who it's by, I always like to go a little deeper and find out. So for years, I didn't know who this was. I knew this was, I was going to point at the signature here. I was doing a walking tour of City College, and a friend of mine who had a zoom lens took a picture of it, and we were at lunch afterwards, and he said, well, look at here. And there was Talabou's name right there. You cannot see it here, but you could see, and those are another one of those little discoveries that I really enjoy finding. So that is section 2. And the Sacramento Art Center was this creation of the New Deal, and it came out of really the impetus of the New Deal. One of the programs of the New Deal was called the Federal Arts Project, and it was a program to support artists specifically, but they came up with this concept of, wouldn't it be great if we helped fund 50 cities across America with a nonprofit art center where people could just come free of charge and be exposed to the art, take art classes, potentially dance classes. And Sacramento was one of the 50 cities because it had these institutions already in place. They knew about the art balls. They knew about the Art Students League. They knew about the Kingsley. Kingsley was a part of that. The board that was established for the Art Center had several Kingsley board members, and I was able to verify that when I was at the archives. So then I did deep dive on that. I'd never seen this piece before. They actually, at the special collections at the libraries, had this beautiful piece. The B was great about promoting Art Center Holds Big Possibilities. And then just to emphasize who's funded it, it was the Federal Arts Project. This is a fun ad from the period because Art for Pleasure's Sake, April 6, 1939, some of the there's famous people on here. Probably the most famous is this 4-year-old. I could say, venture a guess, probably top 10 famous Sacramentans of the last century. Joan Didion. This is Beckforth Young. This was a renowned modernist artist in the Bay Area who came over to be the director. This is the wife of the governor. And just a terrific thing, just a terrific thing. And no one knew that, for example, this young Joan Didion was going to have such a wonderful creative career. National Archives has great documentary evidence of this institution. I only got this photo because an acquaintance of mine who's with the Living New Deal in Berkeley went to and has been many times to research the New Deal at the National Archives in person. He shared with this because he knew of my interest in the Art Center. This is on the back of the photo, just promoting all of the activities these children are enjoying painting in the open court at the Sacramento, California Art Center. So just like the Students' Art League created the art balls, the Art Center created the carnival, the annual carnival. And dare I say, they kind of picked up from where the art balls were. They did murals, they decked out the facility, which is where originally was on 9th, where the Natural Resources building, the original one that they're just restoring. And then they would do other things like dance performances. This is by, love this photo also from the National Archives. Richard Meyer came from a long family of, is it Klaus and Klaus? I know you're familiar, it's a famous Sacramento meat packing company, and that was his family. But to show you the crossover again, he was performing at the Art Center. He also was in 7 different productions of the Art Ball and lead dancer multiple times. Ralph Stackpole. Ralph Stackpole was kind of the dean of artists in San Francisco in the from roughly 1910 to World War II. He did 4 major pieces here. This is the Swanson statue in William Land Park. Stackpole had notable friends. Not only was he the dean in San Francisco, but like many artists, he had spent a year or 2 in Paris or France in the early teens, like 1910, 1911. He returned in 1921, and it's believed that's when he first met Diego Rivera. Subsequently, he went down in 1926 with several San Franciscans to first look at the epic murals he was doing at the Department of Education in Mexico City, but also tried to say, Diego, you got to come to San Francisco. We want your art in San Francisco. They were such good friends that this is evidence. This is a portrait in younger years of Stackpole by Diego Rivera. Second piece is, this is, of course, in Cesar Chavez Plaza. It's called the Coleman Fountain. When I first saw the Coleman and got in Sacramento, I said, boy, these women, what I call the 3 maidens, although it's a Coleman statue, really hearken to Rivera. What's the connection? And more detailed. And the connection is really Rivera. That he went down to visit Rivera in 1926. Stackpole, in what he called the stone yard or the boneyard, in his studio building on Montgomery Street in San Francisco, really changed those maidens from being classically drawn to being, more earthy style of depicting the human form of Diego Rivera. This is when they did get him up in 3031, and Frida, new wife, and Diego stayed with Stackpole for 6 months, lived with him. And I was talking about Timothy Pfluger, the architect. This is Timothy Pfluger, another connection. The third piece is in 1936, the Bee and McClatchy built a new radio station at 7th and I. And as part of that, they wanted to do a bas relief. It's a stone bas relief, and I've never really gotten hard evidence, but it's conjecture that Eleanor McClatchy, who was another big art patron, was probably the one who helped bring Stackpole in on the project. This is a better detail. These are the KFBK players going out to do performances for the troops during World War II. And then here's a detail. Once again, as I show these pieces, the interesting thing about talking about art in the Art Deco period is Art Deco is really a decorative arts style that impacted painting in a less poignant way. Probably the most obvious, there was a terrific show, Tamara de Lempicka. I don't know if anybody had a chance to see it. It was terrific. That's kind of the epitome. But in most Art Deco buildings, particularly of the 30s, the style was social realism, and this exemplifies that. And the bas relief showed all the activities and what the station was supporting, such as music, agriculture was important in the area, sports. And then the last piece was at City College. This was one of the WPA buildings at City College. Is anyone familiar with the mural in the auditorium? Stackpole, and this was a WPA project, did this great mural. In the 80s, some very ambitious professors got together and said, we have to document this. Not only do we have to save this, but we have to create something to preserve in the history. So they built that, and it's in wonderful shape. Unfortunately, they keep the doors locked most of the time. Another discovery. So when I was researching it, the Condos Gallery at City Colleges has a wonderful 1,300-piece collection of art from students and professors. It isn't opened up a lot, but one of the pieces they had that really surprised me, they had this original sketch. It's about 18, 20 inches across by Stackpole of the mural. And then a detail showing, Sacramento notables from the old Western Insurance Company, now Citizen Hotel. This hangar is still at SMF, Sacramento Metropolitan Field. And some of the activities, theater department and art department at City College. And then finally, I wanted to tie this all together with the Kingsley. How did the Kingsley engage with these different organizations? What's the crossover? Wow, they put on a lot of different shows. And what I hadn't appreciated until I did the research, even last week, was the Kingsley not only had speakers, but they had individual shows, and then they had their big annual show specifically for Sacramentans. And some of the notables are, here's Otis Ofield, Gifted Sisters, those are the Brunton sisters. I'm going to talk a little bit about them. Maxine Albro, she was kind of a devotee of Rivera. These paintings are all both upstairs. Otis Ofield was a contemporary of Stackpole. They really enjoyed each other's company. And this is also kind of reflected. You can see some of the, like Tamaro de la Pica would to break the human form into more edge flat surfaces. You can see this in his personal portrait. And this is actually, the white dress is a portrait of his wife. He was a juror in 40, 42, and 43. Another great discovery, just last week. I know a lot about the Breton sisters. They were all successful in their own careers. They would have been in their mid-30s in the 1930s. I had no idea they had a show here at the Crocker. Really surprised me, but I thought it was a terrific thing. But this is early, 1930. This is a famous photo by another famous California female, Imogen Cunningham, and these are the sisters, Helen, Margaret, and Esther. And I'm just going to show one piece. This is at Berkeley. This was also a WPA. It was a Byzantine tile, 80,000 pieces of tile. It was supposed to be for the arts. Although it's not specifically, I sometimes think this might, it was attributed to another sculptor, but it kind of reminded me of Stackpole, actually. This is on the building. The building was originally the powerhouse for Berkeley, going back to the 19th century. It was then converted into the art museum, roughly 1920 to 1950, 60s. Then it was shuttered. All things, they're turning it back into a power station and restoring the murals. For the last couple of years, they've been covered with plastic. And then there's H. Brutton. The interesting thing, the WPA would not pay for 3 artists on one art piece. So Helen was designated, they actually all worked on it, but Helen, under the WPA, got credit when they actually all worked on it. Millard Sheets was another famous Southern California. I did not know how to had an engagement. Kingsley Art Show. He had his own show here in Sacramento, 33, and then he was a speaker in 33 and 37. At the time, he was about 25 years old, so this is he, very handsome man. He was photographed in Southern California by a famous photographer, George Harrell, Hollywood. This mural, called California Commerce, it is here in Sacramento on the back of a bank building wall on 10th Street between J and K. The building's been shuttered for 10 years, and I'm scared to death that, if we're not vigilant, we'll lose it. I included it because it's so terrific. It's a little later, it's 1948, but it really exemplifies the mural work of the 30s and early 40s. Alfred Eichler, designer of the Tower Bridge. I've researched him a lot because I was captivated. He became deaf at age 13 and really struggled until he joined the state architect's office. He was a prolific drawer and painter for the state architecture department, and he did plein air. And he had the whopping participation of, we know what that is. He had the whopping 22 appearances in the Kingsley art shows from 1934 to 1965. This is the only painting I've shown you that I know. This was one of the paintings he entered. It's Westminster in 1936. Of course, the bridge, this is his own drawing, which I love the high contrast. I went back just last week and said, well, how many times was Bernice, my old teacher, my old professor? She actually did participate in both 32, 33 before she moved to Southern California for a very extensive career. And these are her drawings from the 1930 yearbook. And then the last person I'm going to talk about. Is anybody familiar with Dunbar Dyson Beck? Another California transplant, or excuse me, an Eastern transplant to California. He got here because of Eleanor McClatchy. Eleanor McClatchy was living in New York, and in 1936, her ill father asked her to come back and basically take over the mantle for then became the next 30 years of McClatchy newspapers. And she did that kind of old school, you know, the family lineage. She was a playwright. She was a kind of an aesthetic person. She really didn't want to jump back into the newspaper business, but she came home. But she then built around her own little cadre, creative community. And kind of the centerpiece of that community was this gentleman, Dunbar Dyson Beck. Wonderful artist, but a classical artist in the 20th century. He graduated from Yale. He went to the Academy of Rome on a full scholarship for 3 years. He comes home in 1930. What's going on? He comes home to New York City, the depths of the Depression, a classically trained painter. You know, this was not a good time. But he always had some loves, and one of his loves was theater and theater design, also Eleanor McClatchy. So they bonded, and then they bonded on several art projects. And I don't know the real story, but my impression is she invited him to Sacramento, and he finally settled here in 1940. One of the great discoveries also of life was this painting. So I'd only seen this painting in black and white, and this is from an article from another university he attended, and then in 1932 he had himself shot with the same painting. I'd never seen it into color until the last month here at the speaker series. I just said I should go up and take a look again at Otis O'Field's paintings, and I come around the corner in the 20th century and I'm bowled over because here, a new acquisition for the Crocker, Primavera. I was thrilled. And I never had any idea the coloring. The color just kind of, wow, that is amazing. Finally, this is what all started another piece of these connections to my past. This is the piece that I saw first 25 years ago. It's actually probably a study. It's just a piece of canvas. It's actually, I think, still with an art dealer in Philadelphia. It's Salome. And because of my Art Deco interest, I thought it was just a very compelling image. And that's what started my questioning of, well, then who's Dunbar Beck? So with that, and the typography changed. It should say the end, but thank you. I went over.
Thank you, Bruce. Oops. That was wonderful.
Well, thank you.
Thank you for the stories. Now, William Ishmael has a microphone if there are any questions. He's right in the back. And please raise your hand if you'd like to ask Bruce anything. There she is.
Does the Swanson have its head back yet?
The Swan, thank you for asking. So you may or may not know the Swanson sadly got decapitated in 22 or 23. I live in Lamb Park, so it's strange. I had seen it damaged like in the month of December, and then a month later I heard about it getting decapitated. So it's very sad, but the city through Parks, City Parks is who manages that. They brought all the research together. They hired a restoration company, very talented out of the Bay Area, and they restored it.
Yes, I lived in an Eichler home in Thousand Oaks, California, and I was wondering if that's the same Eichler.
Thank you so much for that. That's one of my favorite things to talk about. And that is, so there are two great California Eichlers. One is Joseph Eichler, who was a developer who did the flat roof homes. And then there's Alfred Eichler, the gentleman who worked for Department of Architecture, State of California, for 35 years. Two totally different men, both talented. So I often get that question. And matter of fact, it's one of the things I was taken with Alfred Eichler's story that I kind of feel like I like to help restore that confusion or explain that confusion.
The mural that you talked about that's on a bank building downtown, and I think it's part of this one here.
The Millard Sheets.
Who's responsible for making sure that doesn't go away?
So Sacramento does have what they call it the Department of Preservation. So a city has a preservation officer, and any developer takes that building. So they're very familiar with the mural. So any developer has to take in consideration of what the city's intent to save, probably the whole entire bank lobby area with that on the back wall. And so, but the fear is that, a developer just comes in and overnight destroys it, and then what do? But the city has some teeth. They can actually say, well, you've got to restore it. But that's a dicey proposition. And that actually happened. There was familiar with the term ghost sign? There was a ghost sign, bulldog overalls in Old Sac, and a club owner spray painted it. It was on a brick wall, spray painted it brick red. And the screws were turned, and they were forced to have it recreated, and the restorer did a terrific job. So there is that, but you never want that to happen.
So that's inside. That's an inside mural?
So the one I'm talking for, Millard Sheets, is inside. What I just spoke of was outside.
Okay, thank you.
Eric, did
Bruce.
you have a question?
One more question. Here, let me get you a mic.
He needs the mic. Hey, Bruce.
Hi, Eric.
So, did Sacramentan Ray Eames have a role in any of the art balls when she was a student at Sac City?
That is an excellent. Ray Ames, who was the wife of Charles Ames, the famous mid-century design duo. No, but there is an interesting side story. So one of the realities of Sacramento is if you were a creative, particularly before World War II, your desire, like for a lot of young people, is I'm getting out of town. I'm not coming into town. I'm getting out of town. So Ray actually left town quite early, probably around age 17 and 18. So no, she did not attend City College or junior college. At that time, the junior college had only been formed in 1916. And, no, I guess Ray was born in 1913, I think. So she was a direct contemporary of Bernice. Interesting story, though. The Plifkas, actually her husband was a Fleury. Her husband, Jean Fleury, and that's the Fleury of Wilkie Fleury. His brother was the founder of Wilkie, one of the founders of Wilkie Fleury. Bernice actually, and I have the letters, had engagement, the Fleurys and the Ames had engagement in LA because they were both notable design couples. And so I do know there was that interchange, but not until they were in Hollywood in the 40s. But that's an interesting question because they're both wonderful historical figures. And that's one of the things that fascinate me about life is, how did the Ames become so internationally known? And you had Jean Fleury, who was also a teacher at Art Center, and I knew who that was, and Bernice Plifka. How did they come to their own historical happenings? And one of the twists about Jean Fleury and Bernice Plifka is they actually sadly got caught up in House Un-American activities. So that was another, as you learn about things, you learn insights that you never imagined. Are we okay, or you want to?
Yeah, let's just do these two questions.
Okay.
And then we'll call it.
Thank you.
You're past that.
I don't think I need the mic. This isn't a question. I just wanted to thank you for recording. Sorry? They're recording. Not a question. I just wanted to thank you for the exhaustive research you did for this excellent and instructive presentation. So
Well,
thank you.
Thank you.
Will you be making a documentary of this or a book of your presentation?
Probably not. You know, one of the things my background is communications and marketing, is I really enjoy the engagement with community organizations. So I get great pleasure about doing the research. Even though sometimes I'm labeled a historian, I really see myself as a researcher or an interpreter, is that I'm also very much engaged in nonprofits, particularly the Sacramento History Alliance that I'm historically has been the board for the Sacramento History Museum, the City Archives, the Center for Sacramento History. We also have, hopefully you've all experienced underground tours. That's one of our properties. We also run the Visitor Center in Old Sac. So, you know, I have kind of a multidisciplined, so maybe if I could kind of settle myself down, but I like these multiple activities at once.
Well, but let me put a plug in. Well, so we've been videotaping today's presentation, and that's why I want everybody to speak into the mic, because the questions then go into the tape. So that's available to all Kingsley members. Probably usually goes up about 2 weeks from today. So the reason it's, you need to be a Kingsley member to get the password. Little plug there to become a Kingsley member. Very reasonable. And so let's thank Bruce. Great.